Bonjour, je m'appelle Eric Singler, je suis Managing Director de la famille BVA, fondateur et CEO de BVA Nudge Consulting. Bonjour à toutes et à tous, partout, ici et ailleurs, l'Asie-Pacifique. Je m'appelle Ted, je travaille également auprès de BVA Nudge Consulting. Nous sommes très heureux de vous avoir parmi nous pour cette conférence 2023. Quelques mots en préambule avant de démarrer. Eh bien, d'abord, on n'est pas là pour vous dire « Allez, on est en pleine forme, vous êtes en pleine forme ». Plutôt que cela, je souhaiterais partager avec vous quelques mots importants. D'abord, je souhaiterais vous féliciter, nous féliciter tous d'être ici, tout simplement. Pourquoi? Eh bien parce que vous avez décidé de passer du temps aujourd'hui à apprendre. Et nous savons tous qu'il est difficile de dégager du temps, de décider, de s'engager comme ça pour un intérêt peut-être à très long terme. On est très concentré sur les avantages et les choses à court terme. Là, c'est un engagement à plus long terme. Et voilà, on sait que vous êtes tous très occupés. Nous savons que vous avez beaucoup à faire, beaucoup de priorités. Peut-être qu'hier, vous avez entendu parler d'un problème, et puis malgré ce problème, vous êtes là aujourd'hui. Donc, félicitations, donc merci. Vous avez décidé d'investir dans le long terme, votre intérêt à long terme et les intérêts à long terme de l'entreprise pour laquelle vous travaillez. Nous savons tous que l'apprentissage est essentiel. Nous en sommes convaincus. Vous connaissez peut-être Sheryl Sandberg. Alors, Sheryl Sandberg a travaillé dans un certain nombre d'entreprises, des petites boîtes, Google, Facebook, Meta. Elle est activiste, féministe, militante. Et ce qu'elle dit de l'apprentissage, de la formation, c'est que la capacité d'apprendre, c'est la chose la plus importante qu'un leader, qu'un dirigeant peut et doit avoir. Et voilà. Merci. Également, c'est le deuxième message. Nous avons beaucoup d'intervenants de très haut niveau qui sont aujourd'hui avec nous. Ils travaillent sur les sciences comportementales. Ils nous inspirent. C'est un honneur aujourd'hui de les avoir ici à Human Advantage. Nous avons également des praticiens. Là encore, je souhaiterais les remercier. Ils sont ici pour partager des histoires vraies, des histoires vécues, des défis relevés ou en passe de l'être. Ils vont nous parler d'applications, de quotidien et de recherche académique. Merci à la famille BVA, à l'ensemble de nos collègues. Certains d'entre eux vont modérer les sessions tout au long de cette longue journée. Ils sont eux aussi experts sur des sujets, des secteurs qui vont nous aider, qui vont vous aider, qui vont aider nos intervenants à intervenir au mieux et partager avec nous leurs toutes meilleures idées et expériences. Alors, pour illustrer mon propos, Adélaïde est ici. Je souhaitais insister sur le fait qu'elle va modérer le grand débat sur le sujet de la démocratie. Et elle aurait sinon été membre de la table ronde, puisqu'elle a également rédigé un livre sur le sujet. Des remerciements, Adrien Liard, qui est notre illustrateur, un de nos collègues ici, vous allez peut-être le reconnaître. Il était déjà parmi nous l'année dernière. Il va faire de petits dessins pour couvrir cet événement. On fera le point avec lui de temps en temps. Et tout va bien avec lui aujourd'hui. Je pense que d'ici la fin de la journée, il sera cassé en 1000 morceaux. Mais bon, on va essayer de le préserver le plus longtemps possible. Où sont les diapos? Voilà, le voilà. Adrien Liard, il est là. Donc, nous ne voulons pas non plus oublier notre équipe com. L'équipe, la famille de la com qui est également ici. Et ce sont eux qui sont derrière cet événement. Ils ont énormément travaillé. Vous savez que je vous aime beaucoup. Vous n'êtes pas seuls. Nous sommes tous ensemble. En tout cas, merci pour tout le travail que vous avez effectué. Et puis, nous souhaitons vous remercier. Nous avons les tout derniers chiffres. Nous souhaiterions d'abord remercier ceux qui sont ici ce matin à Paris avec nous, en présentiel, et puis tous ceux qui sont connectés, qui le sont déjà, qui le seront plus tard. Voilà, vous serez bien accompagnés. Nous avons plus de 2700 personnes qui sont enregistrées pour l'événement et inscrites, et en provenance de plus de 80 pays. Alors, quelques mots rapidement sur la famille BVA. Nous sommes une entreprise internationale. Nous avons des bureaux partout dans le monde. Nos collègues à Sydney, Shanghai et de manière générale en Asie-Pacifique nous regardent. Nous travaillons dans trois domaines. Les insights, d'abord, avec BVA BDRC, DOXA, PRS in vivo et BVA Excite. Nous travaillons sur la data et le consulting, le conseil. Nous faisons des enquêtes et puis le nudge consulting. Nous travaillons particulièrement, et c'est là qu'Éric et moi travaillons, sur tout ce qui est sciences comportementales. Donc, comme l'a dit Eric, les sciences comportementales sont dans tout ce que nous faisons finalement. Nous avons aujourd'hui des experts de nombreux secteurs. On travaille dans de très nombreux domaines. Voilà, vous les voyez ici, le tourisme, les services publics, la banque. Et les sciences comportementales sont au cœur de tout ce que nous faisons. Nous sommes leaders dans les sciences comportementales appliquées. Notre travail consiste à mieux comprendre les comportements humains. Nous le faisons pour nos clients, que ce soit la recherche, que ce soit l'élaboration de solutions. 850 passionnés qui travaillent partout. De nombreux sont connectés aujourd'hui. Nous sommes encore une fois très heureux de partager avec vous cette expertise. La famille BVA est une entreprise qui est une entreprise à mission. En anglais, on dirait B Corp. La mission, c'est d'informer les décisions de ceux qui décident et de venir en aide à leurs clients pour trouver de meilleures solutions et créer un meilleur environnement, un meilleur avenir. Nous avons une vraie passion pour l'application des sciences comportementales. C'est pour cette raison-là que nous avons créé The Human Advantage. L'événement a été un vrai succès l'année dernière. Je vois de nombreuses personnes ici qui étaient là l'année dernière et qui sont revenues. Alors on a décidé de remettre ça. Voilà. Peut-être que nous sommes un peu fous de l'avoir fait, mais nous sommes convaincus de la force et de la puissance des sciences comportementales pour faire un monde meilleur. Et c'est avec cela en tête que nous avons créé cet événement. Nous avons encore une fois une équipe de communication extraordinaire. C'est un événement qui est gratuit à toute personne qui s'intéresse au changement et aux changements comportementaux. Voilà. Eric, à toi. C'était la petite page de pub sur la famille BVA. Maintenant, nous sommes partis pour une longue conférence. On espère que ça ne sera pas trop long. C'est un petit peu comme l'année dernière. Même modérateur, même format, même passion. Comme on dit, on prend les mêmes et on recommence. Alors, vous allez devoir me supporter avec mon accent, même si j'ai fait des progrès. Et nous allons, sans plus attendre, jeter un œil au programme. La première partie de cette conférence sera divisée en 4 sessions. Nous allons démarrer avec une keynote avec Dan Ariely. Ensuite, nous avons une autre session sur un sujet important qui est l'engagement des collaborateurs avec Amy Edmondson. Et puis, nous aurons une table ronde. Nous allons évoquer le sujet du développement durable. Et puis, un dernier sujet, c'est important, vraiment un point d'expertise chez nous, c'est l'expérience client avec une table ronde, là encore, avec des exemples concrets de clients. Voilà, ça c'est la première moitié de la journée. Et puis pour cet après-midi, là encore, des sujets très importants, 7 sessions au total. On va démarrer avec Julie Hadar, qui travaille BCG. On va parler de transformation, la science du changement. Nous aurons ensuite Nir Eyal. Je vous parlerai de manière plus détaillée cet après-midi de Nir Eyal et de qui il est. On va parler de nouveaux produits, de nouveaux services. Nous aurons une table ronde avec des experts de Rikit, de Danone, de L'Oréal. Une table ronde sur nous aurons un grand débat. Ensuite, on va parler de démocratie, de la désinformation, de l'engagement. C'est un sujet, ce sera une table ronde très intéressante. Faire pénétrer les sciences comportementales dans les entreprises, dans les organisations, de manière réussie. Nous aurons Daron Acemoglu. Lui aussi, je le présenterai de manière plus détaillée cet après-midi. Vous verrez que c'est quelqu'un d'extraordinaire. On parlera pratique. Et puis, pour terminer, John List, Chief Economist chez Walmart. Il assurera la toute dernière partie en évoquant son expérience chez Uber, Lyft et Walmart et comment ils ont appliqué les sciences comportementales. Voilà, donc c'est parti. Quelques petits conseils techniques avant de poursuivre. Alors, à la fin de chaque table ronde, il y aura un question-réponse. Pour ceux d'entre vous qui sont dans la salle, n'hésitez pas à lever la main. Si vous êtes à distance, n'hésitez pas à utiliser le chat sur la droite de l'écran. Notre équipe les récupérera et les partagera. Si vous avez des idées à partager, n'hésitez pas à tweeter avec le hashtag TheHumanAdvantage. Et puis, nous en avons terminé. Voilà, donc c'est parti. On va démarrer avec Dan Ariely. Je pense que vous le connaissez. L'un des visages les plus connus en matière de sciences comportementales dans le monde. Et puis, nous poursuivrons avec une conversation avec lui. C'est parti.
Welcome everyone to the beginning of a very exciting day here at the Human Advantage Conference. My name is Eric Singler, Managing Director of the BVA family and founder of BVA Nudge Consulting. In a moment, I will pass the questioning to my colleague, Ted Utoff. Ted is CEO of our UK team and our Global Chief Growth Officer at BVA Nudge Consulting. But first, I am very proud to introduce our opening keynote speaker for the Human Advantage 2023, Professor Dan Ariely. Dan is a James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke University. He is also a founding member of the Center for Advanced Insight and has been an instrumental player in the creation of a number of behavioral science consultancies as well as numerous companies from insurance to kitchen gadgets, from bathroom scales to time management apps. I think there are few places Dan can't find value in applying behavioral science. But I'm sure many of you first have known Dan from his writing. Not only did he pen a column for the Wall Street Journal for, I think, nearly 10 years, but Dan is the author of several best-selling books, including the famous, I would say, Predictably Rational, I think published in 2008, which was one of the first books to bring behavioral science to the mainstream discourse, and certainly the most important book with maybe Nudge, published the same year. He followed that up in 2010 with The Upside of Irrationality and 2012, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. Dan has also recorded several TED Talks, fantastic TED Talks, each of which has garnered several million views. Dan, it's also a great personal pleasure to have you here today. I met you, I think, over 10 years ago at Duke University, and I must say, confess, it was a wow moment for me and a fabulous, from that time, source of inspiration. Since then, I have been very fortunate to regularly meet you and, of course, to read, watch all of your work. You was extremely kind to be the first guest of my podcast, the Be Good Podcast in 2020, and now you have graciously agreed to participate in the Human Advantage. So, big, huge thank you. Welcome, Dan. Thank you so much for being with us. And for our attendees, you can read a lot of these books, and including you could play also with Dan to better apply behavioral science.
So thank you for this very lovely introduction. I can't help but remember the last time we met face to face, that after we finished having a drink together, we walked around and all kinds of people who were COVID deniers started attacking me. And I told you at the time about my adventures, but I think it doesn't prepare one to see in reality like somebody attacked, not just online, but in reality with so much anger and so much hate. I would say that in general, I have lots of strange things happening to my life, but I try to make the most out of them. And as you know, my adventures with misbelievers and the questions about what happened during COVID and the nature of beliefs and so on became eventually a book where I try to understand the psychology of beliefs, but also the psychology that takes some people and then change them so that they trust less institution, they start trust less society, they develop alternative theories about what is happening. So hopefully something good would come out of those very troublesome years in that world.
So good to have you here, Dan. I'm going to quote you directly now, and not from one of your books, but from your LinkedIn profile, where you say, "I do research in behavioral economics and try to describe it in plain language. These findings have enriched my life, and my hope is that they will do the same for you." End quote. So 2 questions for you from the start. 1, in your plain language, make the case for applying behavioral science for a better world. And my second question is, since the publication of important books like yours in 2008 with Predictably Irrational, why do you think behavioral science has taken such hold, particularly in the private sector? So I'll start with those 2.
Okay, so let's start with the question of plain language. I think it's not so much about the plain language, use more less complex syntax. I think it's about helping people see the overlap between the kind of things we describe in social science and the kind of things that we're experiencing. So if you think about, let's say something like resilience. You can keep resilience at a high level and talk about resilience. You could also give an example, right? So you could say, here is what resilience is about. If you have a 4-year-old kid and you go with them to the playground and you send them and you say, go and swing, and the kid goes swinging and comes back 20 minutes later, you've been successful in creating a kid that has secure attachment. If you come with a kid and you say, go to the swings, and they go to the swings, but every 60 to 90 seconds they look around to see if you're still there, you have failed. Now, for me, this is about taking this concept of secure attachment, which for me is a big part of resilience, and embedding it in something that creates a very clear connection with life. Now, it's not, after an example like this, it's hopefully not that you say, oh, it only works for 4-year-old kids and only in the playground, but you can envision the picture now, and you can envision the context, and you can say, okay, I can feel the kid, and I can feel the trust, and I can feel the lack of trust and the worry, and now you can start saying, okay, where else does it apply? So, the way that we think in general is with trying to understand the narrative of the situation that we're in, and if we have description that help us make the connection, we're more likely to do it. So that's what I mean is to make the connection. As academics, we write papers, and we have sometimes a section that says applications, but those applications have a long distance between somebody who's able to do it. And usually academics say, my job ends here, but there's a big gap that is left unattended. In terms of your second question, so I think I had a strange fortune that, good luck, that my book was published in the beginning of 2008, my first book, because that was the time of the financial crisis. And there were lots of things that were just very, very unclear about what was happening at that time and at that moment. And I think it was a time where people said, okay, maybe my worldview is not, it doesn't hold, and maybe it's time to look for something else. So I think it was a good timing. I think part of my success is due to this particular lack of, I didn't plan the financial crisis of 2008, but it ended up being good. But since then, I think a lot of businesses have started applying things. And as businesses have started applying things, they started seeing results, and they also started questioning some of their own assumptions. Because, if you're a business and you hear about somebody else experiment, it's not as convincing. But if you try something for yourself, and you discover that it's working in a different way, now you're saying, okay, where else would it fit? What other assumptions I'm doing in the way that is not perfect? But this is also, I think, a good place to think a bit more carefully about the difference between academic research and applied research. And when we do academic research, the main issue is novelty. The goal of academic research is to show a new nuance in our understanding of human behavior, let's say, or the human mind or something, right? It's all about innovation, something new, and it's about finding that something new in a very clear way. So you say, it's this and it's not this, and I know it and I have all the right conditions. On the other hand, applied research starts with the assumption of I want to make the biggest delta. I want to make the biggest impact. And there's a big difference. If I come to a new situation and I say I want to learn the next thing, I try to ignore. Actually, not try to ignore, but I look at the things that could teach me the most. If I try to make the biggest delta, I might take things that I know already. Right? In fact, I would do that. So if a financial institution, let's say, comes to me and they say, we want to get people to lead a better financial life. If I come as an academic, I say, I want to only study those things that nobody else has studied before. I want to study the novelty. If I come in an applied research, I say, let me take all the things that are true and tested already. I'm not looking for novelty, or it's not my main objective, novelty. I want to make the biggest impact. Let me take all the things that we already know. And because of that, in a strange way, as social science develops, it's harder and harder to create novelty, but it's easier and easier to do applied work. Why? Because when we come to do applied work, we also sometimes don't care too much about where the effect is coming from. So if we have 3 different ways to improve long-term financial savings, in an academic study, we would study all 3 of them with the control condition for all of them. We might not study them in combination and so on. In an applied setting, we say, I think all of these 3 methods work. I don't care which one works more or less. I want to make a biggest delta. Let me put all 3 of them together and then make a version of that with maybe a 4th one, yes or no. So we still do evaluate things experimentally. But I think this difference between innovation versus biggest impact, one factor at a time, multiple things at the same time, is a very important distinction. And that's why the application of social science are not just the continuation of a paper, because it's taking multiple papers and combining them in an interesting way and so on. So it's a whole new direction. And I have to say that I didn't recognize this in the beginning, right? When I started, I thought that the experiments that companies are doing would look more like the experiments that academics are doing, but they are not. But also because companies are doing these different experiments that include multiple things and take the things that are most likely to work and so on, the practice world is seeing very big effects because they are basically working on effect size, whereas academics are working on innovation, and that's a very different story.
Yeah. Well, linked to that, Dan, at BV Edge Consulting, we find ourselves one day working with a utility provider, the next day, like you said, a global bank. One project's focused on healthcare, the next one, we're looking at behaviors in front of a supermarket shelf. Where would you say are the areas or sectors or domains, I don't know the word, but where you're seeing the impact of behavioral science in a big way, or seeing it in a way that's inspiring you?
So look, our main message is that it's very hard to change people, and it's much easier to change the environment. So now the question is, what environment do we have control over? So obviously, the one that has made the biggest change is the financial environment. Why? Because we moved to digital money. Imagine there was no digital money and everybody would use cash. It would be really, really hard to change that behavior, because how do you do something on somebody's wallet? How do you get somebody to reflect back? But the moment money moved to digital world, we have control. And by the way, some of the advances in crypto, especially the contracts, are creating even more flexibility. Just imagine one day a regular currency could have contracts, right? Like Ethereum is having now, when you can say this money is going to increase in value or decrease in value, or you could use it for this or you could use it for that, and that's all part of the smart contract. All of a sudden, behavior could be even more powerful. Like we could control more. So it's not about what behavior we can control or not, where we having which domain. It's about where is this domain going? Where is this domain going? And the more domain is going to a system that we can control, the better we could be. So take as an example the question of misinformation. When I started writing this book on this, I was hoping that I will have a final chapter that will have solutions. I ended the book with a section that I called "Hopefully Helpful." Right? I became much more pessimistic during this process. I actually now call this corrosive information, because I think that when you use the term disinformation or misinformation, it makes us feel that the remedy is easy. if you only show the true information, it will override it. But that's not the reality. Reality is that it's corrosive. Somebody who has been exposed to that information, it's going to be very hard to get them back. Right? There's a real loss that is not easy to repair. Now, if you gave me control over the social networks and over television stations and YouTube and so on, I think we could do much better. So, it's an area of life that we could do much better, but I just don't see a way to get control over it. But here is how I look at different areas of life. I look at different areas of life and I say, where are we and where do I think we could be? So think about the way we manage our money. If we could do much better, we're not so good. How we sleep, how we take our medication, hate, misinformation, and so on. And then I ask the question, who has the tools to reduce that gap? Right? And is it in the hand of social scientists? So, for example, when I look at, things that have to do with polluting the world, I think social scientists have a small role to play, but the biggest role is outside of our hands, right? Yes, we can get people to recycle more. Yes, we can get people to drive less, turn off lights. We can do all kinds of things, but the big stones need to come from somewhere else. So that I think is the issue: is to recognize big gaps and saying which one are doable from a social science perspective. And if they are, that's a good area for us to deal with. So I think there's as health is becoming more digital, there's a lot of opportunities there. I think in the financial world, of course, there's lots of opportunities. I think question of sleep, I think, is going to be difficult. Question of eating, we can make some progress. But anyway, that's the way I would look at it and see what we can do.
Okay. Dan, I hardly dare go there, but we're in 2023 and, there's been so much buzz about artificial intelligence broadly, and in particular, AI generated chat bots, ChatGPT, Bard, etc. I'd like to get your perspective on these fast developing tools in terms of how they may shape the future for businesses and behaviors, and perhaps more pointedly, how they may impact our understanding and application of behavioral science. And I know you've run a test on your own quotes recently, which maybe you want to bring to life for people.
Yeah, so I for about 10 years, for a little bit over 10 years, I had a column in the Wall Street Journal in which people asked me questions and I responded. And I recently did a competition between me and ChatGPT. So we took the same question, my previous answer, and ChatGPT, and then I asked people to say which one they like more and to guess which one is which. And I still win, but this is ChatGPT 3.5. We'll see what happens when it gets to 4, and so on. So look, there's a lot of things that will change with this technology. I think programming will change, lawyers will change. I think people would have I think for most things it would be a co-pilot. I don't think it would replace humans, but I think it will be a co-pilot to help throughout. And I think for most things it will be quite good. That's lots of ways it could develop. But I'll tell you what I'm worried about and what I'm optimistic about. So the thing I'm worried about is, of course, the question of fake news, corrosive information. If you think about the possibility that there would be an individual tailored version of corrosive information for everybody, that's a very frightening system. Right? So imagine that I could analyze your weak points, kind of, in the same way that, a cookie. No, but in the same way that cookies are designed, or designed to hit the human preferences in a way that kind of fits our evolutionary routes, but not necessarily good for us now. If we could understand the psychology of somebody and have a filter that takes a particular piece of news and translate it in the most persuasive way for them, that's, very promising for advertising, but very frightening if it's at the hand of people who are trying to spread corrosive information. So that's the place where I'm worried about. And of course, there's lots of ways that it would make lots of improvement, but I'll tell you one direction that I really like is that I think it would allow us to have multiple faces to the same information. So imagine the following. Imagine you go to a doctor, and the doctor talks to you and so on, and there's a summary of that discussion. Now, that summary of the discussion was created probably for a legal reason, because they need to summarize that discussion. But okay, so it's there as a summary, but the doctor has different usages for it. For example, in your next meeting, they might want to remember the highlights. Do they need to read everything? No. But if you think about, we have this object called your last discussion, and then we have a view on that which says, here are the things you need to know for the next meeting. That's important. But even better, now think about the patient. The patient was in the meeting with the doctor. The patient probably remembers very little, right? It's a stressful situation, and people rarely remember what they talked about. And now there's a way to summarize that in a way that is good for the patient. And not only a way to summarize it, but there's a way to create an order of importance. And maybe there's a patient that is having a challenge with taking the medication. We could change the structure of that. So the idea for me, again, we said it in the frightening way, is that here's a piece of corrosive information that I could communicate to you in the most persuasive way. I think there's also amazing opportunities there, especially when you ask the question of, okay, here is some information that you need to act on. Let me create a lens that gives you a translation of that information in a way that is most likely to get you to take the action that we think you should be taking. And that, I think, is quite amazing, right? Because I think if something understood the nuances that gets us to be motivated, that would be amazing. And it's not just motivation. Again, when you look at patients, I can tell you about myself. I have days when I have more pain, and I have the days when I have less pain. On days where I have more pain, it would be great if the information was easier to digest. Like maybe an 8th grade reading version would have been better. So it's not just the patient holistically, but there are nuances and so on. So I think there's lots of opportunities there. There's lots of opportunities to mediate between, okay, here's the knowledge, here's the person in the context, and now let's create a translation layer. So I think that has huge potential.
Great. Dan, we have quite a diverse crowd who join us for the Human Advantage, based on last year's attendance, from marketing and insights professionals to human resources, from career starters to C-suite. It's a real mixed bag. So, as you well know, not every organization has a budget or a team for applying behavioral science yet. Let's hope that they will soon. How would you encourage them to make those early moves to incorporating applied behavioral science or applying behavioral science into their work if they're kind of a fan or a kind of an internal champion, but they don't have the structure or the budget per se just yet?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, there's kind of a couple of different approaches. So I'll give you two very different approaches that I like. The first one is simply to go through a process that helps people understand in their mind what is the potential for incorporating social science. And one of my favorite ways of doing this is to adopt the question, what if people don't know how to X? So imagine that we're trying to do a new bank. And you basically say, imagine you have a bank. Okay, you're a bank and you're saying, should I incorporate social science? And one exercise to do is to go and say, what if people didn't know how to manage their own money? What if people had systematic mistakes in managing money? Don't start by saying, here's your bank and here's little things you could change. Start by saying, what if we started from scratch? Only as a thought experiment, of course, we're not going to build this new bank. But we start saying, what if we thought that people don't know how to use their money to maximize their well-being? What if we don't think that people know how to manage their money so they don't fight with each other? What if we think that people don't know how to give allowances to their kids? You just start with kind of a basic set of questions. Then you can look at them and you can say, do I believe that this is indeed the case? And by the way, when I do this with people, they mostly said yes. I don't think people know how to manage their money. I don't think people know what vacation would get them the most happiness. I don't think people know how to manage their relationship. I don't think people but the moment, and that kind of gives you it's a thought experiment, but it gives you the scope of the possibilities. Because if you're in a domain and you say, no, I think people are exactly correct here and here and here and here, and I don't think there's anything to improve, because, if people don't make mistakes, then that domain, nobody needs us, right? The places that we can help is when people make mistakes and they don't have good intuitions about it. So the first thing that you can do is you can say, let me use this type of question. What if people don't know how to X? And let me at least come to a realization myself or in the organization of, are we dealing in a domain that we think people are experts on? Or are we dealing in a domain that we think people are not expert on, and there's a good chance that they're getting things wrong? So that's from a very high, that's one approach, right? You start from a very abstract way. It's a thought experiment. There's no data involved, and you're just thinking to yourself, do I you can use a different methodology, but do I think that is this a domain that people are experts and they know what they're doing, or they believe that there's people are not experts and they don't know what they're doing? And where does it fall? If you say, people make tiny mistakes, maybe don't worry. If you think, it could be that people make tremendous mistakes, that's kind of abstract, general, holistic for the whole business. The other possibility is to take a new project that is already happening anyway. Look, we know that organizations have a hard time doing anything new. It's just the nature of things, right? And a lot of social science is about friction and so on. So getting the advice of social science in a project that is just starting, it's the right time. If it's too late, it's too late. If there's no project, very hard to create something. But if you have something that you're about to get going, that's a really good time to try and incorporate the advice from social science. And I think it would kind of maximize value per cost, because you're taking something you're going to do anyway. You might do another version, or you might do some changes and so on. So maybe those are the three ways I would think about.
Great. So Dan, we've talked a little bit about misinformation, as you said, corrosive information. So you have a book coming out towards the end of the year, Misbelief, What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. So we'll stay tuned to that. But a last cheeky question from me before I pass it back to Eric. Speaking of staying tuned, I've heard a bit of rumors that there might be an upcoming television show based on some of your evidence, some of your experience, called The Irrational, in the works at NBC in the US. Can you tell us more? Are you allowed to tell us more? And my bigger question, are you about to make behavioral science cool?
Well, I hope it will help make it. I hope it will make it cool. But this was one of the effects of COVID. Is I decided to look for new adventures, and one of them was to team up with some very good writers, and we wrote a pilot, and then NBC is doing now a series loosely based on my life. So the guy would also have scars. My research center is called the Center for Advanced Hindsight. His research center is called the Institute for Advanced Hindsight. But you'll see a lot of similarities You also see some of my research, and it's been quite wonderful, because I work with the writers, and we try to make the research in the series like real research. So it's a TV and it's a TV drama, but we try to stay true to how universities work and how research works. So hopefully it will be successful.
Dan, thanks a lot. I would like to end with one last more personal question, and you mentioned this in your intro. I would like to share the memory of our last encounter in person. As you mentioned, it was in Tel Aviv last year. We had a great moment enjoying some beers, and I found you in the square surrounded by about maybe 20, 30 upset anti-vaccination people with whom you were debating. It has reminded me of the forums of ancient Rome where public matters were debated, even if in this case it was not a cool debate. Then why did you do that? And more generally, what is your mission, maybe in life, or what is the mission you assign yourself by doing this type of things?
So first of all, I did not seek that debate. I don't know if you remember, but I walked through the square by mistake, and I all of a sudden I found myself, and they approached me and so on. It's not, but it's also not exactly true, because in the beginning when it happened, I did search them. Like when they started attacking me in the beginning, I did try to connect with them, because I had a very deep desire to understand them. And and after I failed miserably in trying to explain anything to them one by one, I went a little bit undercover. But for 2 years, I was spending a lot of time in the dens of corrosive information. So, again, if you think about, for me, maybe some of it was kind of therapy. I feel so attacked, death threats almost every day, and I wanted to gain some control by maybe studying that. By the way, which is what they do by inventing all kinds of things. But I think I had a desire. I felt that this was a tremendous force in the world, and that I'm in a privileged position to understand it and maybe shed some light to it, to maybe try and improve something. And in general, that's my drive. My drive is to basically see where I think that we could do better as individuals, society, and so on, and to try and study those things in order to propose solutions, not just to understand them, but to propose solutions. And that's true for everything I do. I do try to look at challenges that I think are big and substantial, and that we would be better off dealing with them, and to try and understand them, but not understand just for the understanding, but to propose some ways forward.
Thanks a lot for this amazing conversation, Dan. It is a gift to our audience. Thanks. It was wonderful.
Thanks again,
Thank you
Dan.
very much.
And to our attendees, stay logged in and tuned in. We are moving ahead into the first session for the Human Advantage 2023. We will see you there.